I'll just listen harder.
We'll get you a horn.
Okay.
Thanks. Morning, sir. Okay, we're at 9 a.m. Okay. Still got some folks coming in.
Good morning, Paul. I enjoyed your visit to OHS last week.
Yes, good morning. I did as well.
Kerry,
Yes.
if you go up in the upper left menu bar, you'll see zoom.us.
Yep.
If you go in there into preferences and select audio.
Okay. I'll go
There's
get my IT guy. He's right next door.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
My audio is on high, so yeah.
yeah. Are you hearing okay? Oh, I'm sorry, Kerry. I meant Kerry Nobles.
Oh, sorry. I thought you meant.
Jen Singer is on, so if she is able to facilitate, we'll find out. Okay.
We've got 2 Carries on the call this morning.
So Kerry, Kerry Nobles, just so class can get started, I'm going to message you in the text thing below.
All right. I'm back at my desk.
Okay.
All right. Whenever you want to start. Carries up, so. All right. Paul, are you the starting things out today?
Yes, I am.
I'm on a Zoom call. Yes. And I'm trying to turn the volume up. I've got my speakers already up at 100. And they're saying that there are Zoom settings where I can make it louder. Can I do that? Zoom settings.
Are we ready for Paul to kick it off?
Yes, we're ready.
And Kerry, in the meantime, Nobles, can you go ahead and mute your speaker?
Yes.
Thank you.
Please go ahead, Paul.
Okay, well, it looks like we have 35 logged on at the moment. So good morning, everyone. It's nice to see all of you, albeit in a small box, but nice nonetheless. And thank you for being here. I understand that there are plenty of other things that you could be doing this morning, but you have chosen to be here. And I believe that speaks volumes regarding your desire to remain relevant, to learn, to grow, and to be engaged in the community. So I commend you for that. So I suspect you're aware at this point that those of us that are here to support the leadership team of Dr. Korach, Christopher, and Liz graduated from the last program, and we're here to support the leaders as we can. And I'm delighted to be back. I found the program last year to be extremely beneficial. It met and exceeded all of my expectations and my reasons for choosing to participate. I learned a lot, tools, concepts, ideas, and approaches that I use today. And by having the opportunity to come back, I feel like it's a bit of a refresher course. So I appreciate the opportunity. But my role this morning is to introduce our guest speaker. And each month, we're fortunate to have the opportunity to hear and learn from Dr. Korach and Christopher. But we also have the opportunity to hear from distinguished, recognized leaders in the community. And this month is no exception. Our guest speaker today is Kerry Tymchuk, who is with the Oregon Historical Society. And I'm a newer resident of Lake Oswego. I was familiar with the Historic Society and their museum, but I had never visited. So I used the opportunity to introduce Kerry as an incentive to visit the museum. So I went last week, I viewed the exhibits, and I also had an opportunity to meet with Kerry. And by the way, he was very generous with his time. I appreciated that very much, Kerry. But as a result of my online research, my time at the museum, and my time with Kerry, I've learned a few things about both. So I'd like to share some of that with you. So first of all, in regards to the museum, they are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and they were founded in 1898. And the mission of the society is to preserve our state's history and make it accessible to everyone in ways that advance knowledge and inspire curiosity about all the people, places, and events that have shaped Oregon. And they accomplish that through shared values of integrity, invitation, equity, and inclusion, cultural humility, accessibility, and learning. But what's particularly impressive is the depth of the museum collection. And I know we have limited time today, and I don't want to bore you with a lot of facts and figures, but it's so impressive, I feel compelled to read off some of the stats. So I'm going to do this real quickly. Here I go. The museum cares for an estimated 85,000 artifacts ranging in size from political buttons to a steam-powered logging locomotive. Their library holds more than 35,000 books and pamphlets, 3.5 million photographic images, 30,000 maps, 8.5 million feet of film and video, 16,000 rolls of microfilm, 1,000 periodical titles, 12,000 linear feet of manuscript materials, and oral history interviews from more than 6,000 Oregonians. These collections are the largest and most comprehensive on the globe, supporting research on Oregon's history. So if you have never visited the museum, I would strongly suggest that you consider doing so. And now a little bit about Kerry. So Kerry is the executive director of the Oregon Historical Society, a position he's held since 2011. He oversees a staff of 50 and an annual budget of approximately $8 million. He was born and raised in Reedsport. He graduated from Willamette University with an undergraduate degree in history. He also graduated from Willamette University's College of Law with his Juris Doctor. He has earned a reputation as a highly respected public servant. He served as the Marion County Deputy District Attorney. He served as the Director of Speechwriting for U.S. Secretary of Labor Elizabeth Dole. He served as the Chief Speechwriter and Legal Counsel for U.S. Senator Bob Dole. He served as the Oregon Chief of Staff for U.S. Senator Gordon Smith. He has co-authored 4 books with the Doles and has worked with 4 Oregon business icons in writing their autobiographies. He's been recognized by the Oregon business industry as the Oregon Statesman of the Year and the most admired nonprofit executive. He was a recipient of the Liberty Award presented by the Oregon League of Minority Voters in recognition of outstanding contributions on behalf of all people of color. He's a board member of the Allen Trust Company, a member of the Board of Trustees for Willamette University, and he's the board chair for Special Olympics Oregon. He is married, he has 2 children, plus, and possibly from my perspective, the most impressive because I'm a fan of the show and I watch regularly, he is a 4-time Jeopardy champion during the Alex Trebek era. Ooh, I see Jen raising her hands. She's excited about that. But all this information that I just provided to you, you can find online as I did. But when I met with Kerry, I asked him a few questions. So the first question I asked him is, what are you most proud of? And his response was, he's looking at me as do I recall, his kids, his relationship with the Doles, and his success at turning around the Oregon Historical Society, because when he assumed leadership, they were in financial distress and at risk of closing. I also asked him, what are you doing when you're most happy? And he said, playing golf and playing with his amazing dog. And I asked him, what else do you still hope to accomplish? His response, on the cover of People magazine as the sexiest man alive. And I asked him, when did you realize that you were a leader? And his response was when he was in elementary school, because he was very comfortable and effective at speaking in front of others. So having had the opportunity to meet with Kerry, I have come to the conclusion that he is an outstanding steward of our state's history, and I'm confident you will soon agree with me that he is abundantly qualified to speak with us today and to share some of his thoughts on leadership. So without further ado, Mr. Kerry Tymchuk.
Well, gosh, thank you. Paul, you wrote that just the way you read that just the way I wrote it. And it was great to see you down at OHS. And whenever I hear a nice introduction like that, I think of something that my old boss Bob Dole used to say, and that was, he said, one of the problems with Washington D.C. is that one, everybody got a nice introduction, and two, everybody believed their introduction. And there was one way that he kept a good head and feet on the ground and didn't believe all the nice things that were being said about him. And it was from a story that I had found in the New York Times and placed on his desk because I knew he would enjoy it. And it was a story about a convention of autograph collectors in New York City. And at this convention, they were having an auction of rare autographed items. And one of the first items up for bids, according to the story, was an autographed photo of former presidents Carter, Ford, and Nixon standing on the White House lawn that each of them had autographed. And the photograph was taken in 1981 when then President Reagan sent Carter, Ford, and Nixon to Egypt to be our delegation to Anwar Sadat's funeral. You might recall a very famous picture in the night. The helicopter was taking them from the White House lawn to Andrews to fly to Egypt. And there they were, Carter, Ford, and Nixon. And Senator Dole, who had the quickest wit in Washington, D.C., got into a little bit of trouble when he looked at the picture of Carter, Ford, and Nixon, and with the press around said, there they are. See no evil, hear no evil, and evil. And he had to apologize to Nixon for that one once the word got out. But very rare, as you might imagine, to have a photograph signed by 3 presidents, and it was auctioned off for $5,000. Well, the very next item up for bids, as luck would happen at this auction, was an autographed photo of Larry, Moe, and Curly, and it went for $10,000. So Senator Dole said whenever he got a big head about being the leader of the Senate and presidential candidate, and all he had to do was remember that according to the American public, 3 stooges were twice as valuable as 3 presidents. So that's. But I want to talk a little bit today about. I had the great good fortune of learning about leadership from one of the true masters, one of the great leaders of our time in my book, and that was my old boss Bob Dole. Who for nearly half a century was one of the most influential congressmen and senators. Fingerprints can be found in every major piece of legislation. And watching him work was a master class in leadership. And I've been thinking about him a lot lately. Will be 1 year ago and another week and a half or so that he passed at the age of 98 after a remarkable life. And the lessons I learned from him on Capitol Hill are lessons that go beyond, transcend politics into personal life and business and community organizations. Whatever you do, I think these leadership lessons are helpful. And first, let me congratulate all of you for taking this class and being interested in leadership and being interested in your community. One of my favorite quotes is the late Governor Tom McCall, who once said that heroes are not giant statues framed against a red sky. They are individuals who say, this is my community, and it's my responsibility to make it better. So as I look at my Zoom board here and see all your photos, I'm looking at photos of heroes, because by what you were doing, I think you're signaling your interest and your willingness to give your time, talent, and treasure to help make your community, to help make Lake Oswego better. So the first lesson I learned from Senator Dole is understand that there are causes greater than yourself. And I think you're showing that today by again, giving your time to the cause of Lake Oswego, understanding there are causes greater than oneself. And I saw this most clearly in early 1996, when Senator Dole was running for president, had announced his candidacy, and it was a couple of weeks before the New Hampshire presidential primary, the traditional first step, on the road to the White House. And Senator Dole was running to get the nomination, the Republican nomination, of course, to run against incumbent President Bill Clinton. And President Clinton had just come to Congress to request authority to send American troops to Bosnia to intervene over there against Slobodan Milosevic, who was slaughtering the people of his country. And I saw pollster after pollster, consultant after consultant, coming to see Senator Dole and to say, Senator, your path is clear. You're wanting to run against President Clinton. You need to run against him on this idea. And polls of the American public showed overwhelming opposition to the thought of sending troops to Bosnia. People couldn't find Bosnia on a map. Nobody knew what was our interest in getting involved in a civil war in that country. And more to point for Senator Dole, polls of New Hampshire Republicans showed even more overwhelming opposition against this idea. And no Republican candidate had ever won the nomination after first losing the New Hampshire primary. And so for Senator Dole, the consultants told him, your path is clear. You want to oppose President Clinton on this. You want to fight President Clinton on this. And if you do, you will win the New Hampshire primary. And Senator Dole didn't think about it for much longer than a few hours, I think. And I heard him say, we could only have one commander in chief at a time. And like it or not, Bill Clinton is my commander in chief. And Senator Dole, of course, was a World War II veteran. And my duty here in the Senate is to support my commander in chief. And so instead of leading the opposition against President Clinton, he and John McCain, Senator McCain, another veteran, another Republican, another war hero, led the support for it. And the only reason it passed, and troops went there and they were able to dislodge Milosevic from power in the genocide over there. The only reason that had occurred was because Senator Dole led the effort to do so. And in return, he lost the New Hampshire presidential primary. And Pat Buchanan, who the conservative firebrand, beat him, running a lot on that issue. Now, Senator Dole would later go on to win the nomination, becoming the first Republican candidate to ever do so after losing the New Hampshire primary. But the bottom line was that he was willing to lose the nomination. He was willing to lose all that he was fighting for to do what he thought was best for the country. He put what was best for the country way above what was in the best interest of his political interest. That's something we don't see very often anymore from Washington, D.C., but it's most assuredly a sign of a true leader to understand that there are causes greater than yourself. And he put the cause of country above the cause of his candidacy. And we should all take a lesson from that. Another lesson I learned was that that victory need not be total. Victory need not be total. And that's something we've also lost sight of the fact. Now there are leaders, and back then there were leaders who shall go nameless, Newt Gingrich, Donald Trump, who thought that victory had to be accomplished, total domination. You needed to get everything you wanted, or it wasn't good enough. And Senator Dole had a different viewpoint after his years on Capitol Hill. He remembered what the late Senator Everett Dirksen had said, he said that I am a man of fixed and unbending beliefs. And one of my beliefs is flexibility. And Senator Dole was flexible. He understood the art of compromise, the value of compromise. He knew if you wanted to get 100% of what you wanted, you would most often get 0% of what you wanted. So he would go in, he'd work in bipartisan way, he'd work with the Democrats to craft a bill that gave him 20 or 30 or 40% of what he wanted. And he'd come back the next year and get another 20 or 30 or 40%. But he knew that if you wanted everything your way or the freeway, you almost always got nothing or little of it. And compromise was a valued principle for Senator Dole. And to get a little victory this year, come back and get a little victory next year, but make everybody work together. And that's what he did as the leader of the Senate for many, many years. And I also learned from him that, nobody's going to win everything. Nobody is going to win everything. And there is value in defeat. And I saw this most clearly in the spring of 1995, gosh, over 27 years ago, it doesn't seem that long. And the Republicans had just taken control of the House and Senate for the first time in half a century. Newt Gingrich was the Speaker of the House. And you may recall he was trying to drive through what he called the contract with America. And over in the House, you can pass anything very quickly. The rules are much different than the Senate. And they had passed the Balanced Budget Amendment to send a balanced budget amendment to the states for approval to the US Constitution. And it came to Senator Dole and to the Senate, he was the leader then, at a very critical time. He had just recently announced his candidacy for president. He wanted to show his ability to be a leader and to get this through the Senate, which was a very important bill to the Republicans, to conservatives on who were going to be voting in the primary. And to get that done, to send a constitutional amendment to the state legislatures for ratification, you needed to have 67 votes out of 100. Greater than 2/3 was what the Constitution said, so 67. Senator Dole thought he had achieved that. He had all 54 Republicans who were in the Senate and 13 Democrats, he thought, were willing to cross President Clinton and to vote for the constitutional amendment. And then the night before the vote, Mark Hatfield, then representing Oregon in the US Senate, a great man, a friend of Liz's and mine, Senator Hatfield came to Senator Dole and said that he had searched his conscience and that he had decided that he could not vote for the balanced budget amendment. He didn't think the Constitution needed to be cluttered up with it. If Congress wanted to balance the budget, they should just balance the dang budget. Senator Dole had just a night to convince Senator Hatfield to change his mind. He came to me to ask for, because he knew we were friends, what can we do? And he had people call Senator Hatfield, who Senator Hatfield admired, but I knew that once Senator Hatfield made his mind up, that was it. But to show you the respect that these two great lions of the Senate had for each other, the morning of the vote, Senator Hatfield came in to see Senator Dole. And not many Oregonians know about this. And he offered to resign from the Senate on the spot immediately. He was not going to be running for re-election the next year. He's going to be retiring. So he'd retire a year early, leaving 99 senators in the Capitol, meaning that the 66 votes he had, you'd only need 66 of 99 to be greater than 2/3. You needed 67 out of 100. But with 66, Senator Dole could achieve this victory, this heroic victory for him, and send the balanced budget amendment to the states. Now, some leaders, I'm confident, would have accepted it immediately, had Senator Hatfield resign, just to get that victory for themselves. Senator Dole did not. He rejected it out of hand, believing, as he always did, that every senator should vote his conscience. And a couple of years after that happened, after he was out of the Senate, he went back, was invited back to the Senate and to speak to his former colleagues and to share his thoughts on his time in the Senate. And he described that day as the most difficult day of his almost 30 years in the Senate. The fact that he was so close to achieving this victory that he had long fought for and then couldn't do it. And he asked rhetorically, he said, if I had to do it all over again, would I have accepted Senator Hatfield's offer? And he said no. And then he shared these words, which I want to share with you. And remember that these are the words of someone who was grievously wounded in the hills of Italy in the final days of World War II. Never would regain use of his right arm, would have to learn to use his left arm. Lived in pain for a lot of time from that forward. Spent 4 or 5 years in hospitals recovering from the wounds. And this is what he said. He said, quote, "I think one of life's great milestones is when a person can look back and be almost as thankful for the setbacks as for the victories. Gradually, it dawns on us that success and failure are not polar opposites. They are part of the same picture, the picture of a full life where you have your ups and you have your downs. After all, none of us can ever lose unless we find the courage to try. Losing means that at least you were in the race. It means that when the whistle sounded, life did not find you watching from the sidelines. Life did not find you watching from the sidelines." I think that is such an important part of leadership, especially, we just went through an election campaign and half the candidates won and half the candidates lost. And Senator Dole made a habit of calling candidates who lost to share this thought with them, to tell them that losing means at least that you were in the race and that you were not watching from the sidelines. So it's important as you go forward in business and life, and if any of you run for office, to remember that you're not going to win all the time, but to keep bucked up, keep your spirits up, and remember that you're in the race. That's the important thing, to be in the race, to be in there fighting and trying to make a positive difference. Another lesson I learned from Senator Dole is what the late Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, once told him. And he said, Bob, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. And a great lesson for leaders to remember. And every year when I was working in the Capitol, they had one of the Capitol Hill newspapers would have a poll, a survey of the minions of the Senate, for lack of a better word, the elevator operators, the waitresses in the Capitol coffee shop, the security guards, the janitors. And they would ask them to secretly rank the 5 nicest and 5 nastiest senators. And the runaway winner every year for nicest senator was Bob Dole. And that's because he treated everybody like a senator, everybody like a president or prime minister or important person, be they janitor, waitress, security guard, or whatever. He would joke with people. He had a great sense of humor. He would look people in the eye. He would invite them. I remember this gal from Oregon, a young 18, 19-year-old named Whitney Duggan. She was from Medford. And Whitney had been rendered a paraplegic in a horse riding accident and was in a wheelchair, a total paraplegic. And like a lot of people with disabilities, kids with disabilities, she adopted Senator Dole as their role model or hero because of his disability, his useless right arm. And so she started to write to Senator Dole and encourage him on in the campaign. And since she was from Medford, the letter ended up on my desk. Senator Dole wanted to know if I knew where Medford was and might have known this lady. And so I wrote back on Senator Dole's behalf. And the two of them started a pen pal relationship where Whitney would write him letters and encourage him. And Senator Dole would send thank you back. And eventually he invited Whitney and her mother, Linda, to come visit Washington, D.C. And he arranged the royal tour of every monument, everything you wanted to see in a special van because of her wheelchair, and gave them the tour of their life. And the day after the presidential election in 1996, the day after Senator Dole lost to Bill Clinton and his dream of reaching the White House was not going to happen, he came to my desk and he said, Whitney's feeling pretty low. Let's give her a call. So here was a man who had just lost, the ultimate prize he'd been trying to get, and his thoughts were not with himself, but they were with this young teenage lady in Medford, Oregon, in a wheelchair. And that says a lot, I think, about leaders. And again, the decency, the civility, which is a leadership quality we have lost, not just in our politicians, but in ourselves as well. And we see it all the time at school board meetings, where people go and shout down the members, town hall meetings, where people go not to hear what the senator has to say, but what they themselves have to say. And social media may be part of it, but I mean, we've lost some civility and decency, and it's up to leaders to bring it back. Another lesson I learned from him is to make the most of what you have. This was a lesson taught to him by a fellow Armenian immigrant doctor named Hampar Kalikian. After Senator Dole's wounding, again, as I said, he spent 3 or 4 years in hospitals trying to regain use of his right arm, trying to restore him to what he was before the war, which was a really, strong, tall, handsome, physical fellow with was a great athlete, and he wanted to be that again. And Dr. Kalikian, an Armenian immigrant who performed 5 or 6 surgeries on Senator Dole without ever charging him anything, delivered what Senator Dole called the verbal equivalent of a slap on the face. And he told him no matter what happened, he could not restore him to what the condition he was before the war, before he was wounded. And he said the important thing was that you had to make the most of what you have. And Senator Dole took that lesson to heart. And he had originally planned before the war, he was a student at University of Kansas, a pre-med student, and he wanted to be a doctor. And he said when it dawned on him, that finally after Dr. Klick had talked to him, that he could not be a surgeon. He would never regain use of his right arm. And since he couldn't perform surgeries with his right hand, he said, perhaps I could reach out and shake hands with my left hand. And he turned his thoughts and interests from medicine to public service to politics. And he knew he had a disability, but that would not hold him back. And he made the most of what you have. And all leaders, good leaders, make the most. You all have different qualities, but all of you should look at what your strengths are, look at what your weaknesses are, but always remember to make the most of what you have, to make the most of your qualities. And another great lesson I learned from Senator Dole, and again, one that is so important in these times, is good leaders, as his hero Dwight Eisenhower once said, good leaders not only need a strong backbone, they need a strong funny bone. And time again, I saw how important a sense of humor was to Senator Dole as a leader. There were countless meetings where the Democrats and Republicans had been in his office trying to negotiate a bill, everyone on loggerheads, looking at each other, swearing under their breath. And you think the whole thing was going to fall apart. And Senator Dole would, with a joke, a witticism, make fun of somebody, make fun of himself, would get them back on track and would start them laughing and would lead them back to a solution. And Senator Dole and I, after, as Paul might have mentioned, after I helped write with Senator Dole write 4 books. And one of the books we wrote was a book called Great Presidential Wit, I Wish I Was in This Book by Bob Dole. And it's a compendium of stories and jokes told by our presidents. But instead of going chronologically from Washington to the present day, as many of these books do, we did something different. We offered the first ever ranking of presidents by their sense of humor, from the least funniest president to the funniest president. Doing a lot of research, reading a lot of speeches, and what we discovered was that presidents who historians have ranked as the least successful were also, not coincidentally, presidents that we ranked as having the worst sense of humor, the biggest sticks in the mud. Folks like Millard Fillmore, James Buchanan, Benjamin Harrison. These were all presidents, by the way. They're presidents that historians have ranked as the least successful. And the presidents that we ranked as having the best sense of humor are presidents that historians have ranked as among the most successful. And Senator Dole thought it proved a point. That again, as his hero Dwight Eisenhower once said, humor is part of the art of leadership. It's part of getting things done. And just a few stories about my favorites from the book, from Presidential Senses of Humor. William Howard Taft. He was our 27th president and better known as our fattest president, famously weighing in at some 350 pounds. And famously getting stuck in the White House bathtub one time. And Taft knew the most important rule of political humor is that you make fun of yourself. You be self-deprecating. A lesson that a current former president, our most recent former president, could never understand. He was always lashing out and making fun of other people and you're president of the United States. Have a little sense of humor about yourself. And Taft knew he weighed 350 pounds. He knew that people made fun of his weight. So he would go along with it. And he would love to tell the story of how when he was an attorney in Ohio, riding the rails from one appointment to another, he was in a train station waiting for the train. And the manager of the station came over and said, Mr. Taft, I regret to inform you that it's the economic policy of the railroad that it will only stop if there are 5 or more passengers waiting for the train. That's the only way it makes economic sense, to get the train down, to steam it back up. And so Taft, needing to get to his next appointment, sent a telegram to the station before his. And the telegram said, large party awaiting you at next stop. The train stopped and Taft got on. Trying to think, is number 4 in our ranking was Teddy Roosevelt. Number 3, Franklin Roosevelt. Number 2, as many of you probably guessed, was Ronald Reagan. It was hard to, I read every speech he gave as president and during research for this book. and it was hard to find more than a dozen or so that didn't begin with a story, a joke, an anecdote from his Hollywood days. Reagan just loved to tell jokes, and he made fun of himself, his age, the fact that he was a movie star, and he just used sense of humor so well to accomplish things. He had a joke for every holiday. Every St. Patrick's Day, he would tell the joke about the fellow who rocked into an Irish bar, looked around the room, and said in a loud voice, "You show me an Irishman, and I'll show you a wimp." And at that, a big strapping 6 foot, 200-pound fellow got over, took his jacket off, rolled up his sleeves, walked over to him and said, "I am Irish." And the fellow said, "Well, I'm a wimp." So, and Reagan also used to tell jokes about, he was president, as you might recall, when the Iron Curtain was finally starting to fall. Gorbachev had come to power, glasnost in Russia. Maybe finally things were changing in Russia. And Reagan thought he could encourage things along by telling jokes that Russians were telling about their own country. So part of to show the weakness and the fraudulency of the communist system. So part of our State Department staff in Moscow, their job was to wander the streets of Moscow, listen to jokes that people might be telling, report them to the ambassador, report them to the president, who would then tell the joke. And Reagan loved to tell the story of the fellow in Russia who was waiting in line. And in those days, and of course in Russia, you waited in line for everything, shortage of everything. And he was waiting in line to get a car, which is a long, several-year process. And finally, his number came up. The bureaucrat was stamping his papers. "Congratulations, comrade. You've been chosen to receive a car. Please come back on June 6, 1991, 3 years later, to pick up your car." And the fellow reached into his pocket, flipped open his date book, said, "June 6, 91, morning or afternoon." And the bureaucrat says, "Comrade, it's 3 years from now. What does it matter?" And he said, "Well, the plumber's going to be at my house that morning and I need to be there." So that was one of Reagan's favorite jokes about Russia. Number one, by the way, the best sense of humor in presidents, Abraham Lincoln. Not just one of the best, most outstanding presidents, but one of the funniest presidents. And Lincoln, of course, as you all know, was president during the most difficult time in American history, when the nation split itself in two and went to war. Lincoln was dealing with that. He lost his favorite teenage son to illness in the White House. His wife, Mrs. Lincoln, had mental issues and was probably clinically depressed. And he still needed a sense of humor to get through some very dark days. He told a joke at a cabinet meeting one time and nobody laughed. And Lincoln said, "Gentlemen, I laugh because I must not cry." And it was a sense of humor and jokes and the ability to make fun of himself and others, mostly him, that got him through the war. So again, the importance of keeping a sense of humor today when things seem so serious all the time and nobody seems to be able to rely on a sense of humor, an important asset of leadership. Now, what Senator Dole said was, I want to share with you what he said was the best definition of leadership he had ever seen. And there were the words of Dwight Eisenhower. And there were the words that Eisenhower wrote to be released to the public and to the world if D-Day, the invasion at D-Day, was a failure. The night before the invasion, he retired to his tent and he wrote two statements, one to be released to the world if D-Day succeeded and landings occurred, one to be released if they failed and they were driven back from the beaches. Now, obviously, the one that was released to the world was a success. Never once in that statement, never once was the word "I" used. Things would have been different had it failed. And here is what Eisenhower wrote. And Senator Dole has a picture of Eisenhower, had a picture of Eisenhower with these words engraved on his wall in his office. Eisenhower wrote, "Our landings have failed, and I have withdrawn the troops. My decision to attack at this time and place was based upon the best information available. The troops, the air, the Navy did all that bravery and dedication to duty could do. If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine and mine alone." Let me repeat, if any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine and mine alone. Think of all the problems we could solve if our leaders, in society adopted that philosophy that if we failed at what we're trying to do, if we didn't get something done, the blame and fault is ours and ours alone, and not blaming somebody else. I mean, that to me is the definition again of a true leader. I agree with Senator Dole. It's one of the best definitions of leadership I've ever seen. So with that, I've yammered on for a while. I'd be happy to take questions about my leadership roles, or anything I've talked about, or Jeopardy questions, or whatever you want to talk about.
Well, thank you very much, Kerry. We appreciate your thoughts, the stories, and the historic perspective. And he is correct. We have about 10 or 15 minutes. So if anyone has any questions, please go ahead.
I can share some stories about Liz. Liz and I first got to know each other at Willamette. She was a class ahead of me. She earned her little place in history as Willamette was founded in 1842. 1842. It's the oldest university west of the Mississippi. It took until 1979 for the student body to elect a female student body president. And Liz was the first woman student body president in Willamette history. And yeah, how about that? and then they reverted to form, and I was student body president the year after Liz. So, but not due to anything she did. She was a fabulous student body president, has been a fabulous leader for many, many years. So. All right, there's got to be a question or two, at least a Jeopardy question.
Yes, Kerry, I have a question for you. Christopher Boyer
Yes.
here. We have a friend in common, Mr. Edward Brewington.
Yes, on my board of directors at the
Yes.
Historical Society.
Yes. You've spoken so much about traits of good leaders, and you yourself have been recognized for being a great leader. And you've had to lead OHS through some vandalism and some very poor behaviors. How important do you feel the role is of the leader in keeping the tone and setting the emotional response to those things for your team, and getting everybody, shepherding people through this difficult time, and keeping your team on the same page with the perspective that you want to see there at OHS?
Well, thank you. Good, great question. And we were, as some of you might know, during the racial reckoning, protests and riots in Portland in 1980, OHS was targeted and vandalized. They broke almost every one of our huge windows down in the park blocks. They threw a flare into the building, spray painted "No More History" on our wall. There's a nice, catchy slogan. And it was obviously really, really disturbing. I mean, and the fact is, the protesters had no idea what what they were doing. I mean, we have been leading the way, the Historical Society, and telling the truth about Oregon history. As I often say, we're not the Chamber of Commerce. We're not the Tourism Bureau. We're not there to promote all things Oregon. We're the Historical Society. We're there to tell the truth and the true history of Oregon. And it's important to tell the truth, especially in these times when the truth is often under assault. People's histories, they invent their history. We tell the good, the bad, and the ugly of Oregon history. And spoiler alert, there's a lot of ugly. From the treatment, of course, of the indigenous nations, indigenous people who were here first, to African American. I'm gonna let my dog out real quick here. Hang on. So. And I'm back. To treatment of Asian, Japanese Americans during World War II. These are stories that need to be told. And we've had people go through some of our exhibits, come to some of our programs where we highlight this, and come out and say, you make me feel guilty for being a white man. And our response to them is, look, you're not responsible for what happened 100 years ago, but you're responsible for knowing what happened 100 years ago and how that affects and impacts history today. So it's important. Our job, as we said, is to tell the true history of Oregon. That's a mission that my staff is completely on board for. And when we were attacked and our windows were broken and a flare thrown in. I think we all united around that mission and the understanding that we are doing what we were supposed to do. It helped that the attack on us led to a huge outpouring of support for us from our members, from donors. I joke, if I'd known that would happen, I'd have broken the damn windows 5 years ago. But it's important for leadership to get everybody bought in to your vision. I've always used the old saying that, you know, if you're a pilot and if you want somebody with you on the landing, they need to be with you on the takeoff. So get them as you're embarking on a project, a campaign, or whatever. You want people with you at the beginning and understanding, sharing the mission and the vision. And then when you land that plane at the end, they'll still be with you.
Great, thank you. Kirsten, go ahead.
Yeah, Kerry, so good to see and hear you again. I always appreciate when you speak in the many times I've been able to listen to you. And I didn't really have a question, but you started talking about it, and I guess I wanted to give you a genuine thank you for appreciation in your leadership at the Historical Society. The Oregon Health Authority, I know, has done some good work with you. The history walk, particularly in regards to the ideals that Oregon was built to be a white utopian state and the impact that has on us today, the role you have played in your leadership role in the Historical Society and trying to really dismantle and understand our history and own that. It is hard for, you know, the white man you referenced or myself to understand and appreciate and learn what it is like to have a different historical experience in this state. And I am really proud of the work that you guys have started, and I look forward to us continuing to tease apart our history in this state and what it means for our students. As a board member, our students are begging for this truth to be shared. They're begging for curriculum that is taught from many different people's lived experience, right? Because history is how we live it. And you guys have really created a wonderful pathway for starting that conversation and bringing the adults in their life on board, because these students need to be met by the adults so we can really get the change we want. So it's really more of a kudos and
well, thank you very
the
much.
wonderful work
We are doing a lot of work now with curriculum. The state legislature has passed, you know, some laws requiring schools to teach a more diverse history, and teachers are looking for resources, and we've got them, and we're providing them to teachers. So my, you know, as you know, Liz is on the Lake Oswego School Board. My wife is on the Beaverton School Board, and boy, that's been a challenging role as well. So
I had a question.
yes.
You had talked about humor as a part of leadership, and you talked about the presidents. How does Barack Obama fall on funniness?
I would say
he wasn't mentioned.
Right. Well, we did the book was written before he was president,
I
but he
figured
would
that.
be pretty high up. I mean, he very quick sense of humor and enjoyed making jokes about himself and, you know, laughing at himself, which was so key. He also, I mean, modern day presidents have also had the benefit of having some very talented speechwriters who get, you know, who there are several occasions in Washington, D.C. where the president is almost required to be funny at the things called the Gridiron Dinner and the White House Correspondents' Dinner, where they go and have to be funny. And they've got, you know, writers like myself, who I wrote for Senator Dole for some of those speeches, who, you know, help with the sense of humor. But you gotta appreciate a sense of humor too, and know what's going to be funny. And again, not to name names, but former President Trump had no ability to have a sense of humor about himself, or so, and which you could see in his speeches. And but yeah, Obama would be very high up. So
Curtis, go ahead.
All right, Gary, thank you for being here today. I've really appreciated everything you've shared as well. Having worked with such a notable leader in such an important capacity, what are the ways, either with Senator Dole or other leaders you've worked with, that they've made you feel empowered to do your job?
Oh, great question. And that's, yeah, and good leaders have good staffs back in Washington, D.C. They know they can't do it all, and they have ability to trust and rely on, the people that they've asked them to help them do the job. And as a speechwriter, it's kind of a weird position where you're, putting words in your boss's mouth all the time. I mean, that's what you're doing for a living. And with Senator Dole, it was, I had come to work to him from his wife. I had worked for her first, and then came to work for him. And of course, I'd followed his career, knew his career, and so the first speeches I wrote for him, he would spend time with me and a little more time, and so imparting on me his style, how we like to do things. And then, since I did the job for 6 years, by year 1 or year 2, you pretty much get it. And the trust between us was great. And he knew that I didn't have any interest or advocacy in putting my beliefs in his. He was the one who was elected. I wasn't trying to convince him of anything. And so he trusted me implicitly to do what I thought was in his best interest. And you got to have that two-way trust relationship. And something, is it okay to disagree with your boss? Sure it is. You don't want to disagree with them more than 50% of the time, because that would be pretty unsatisfying work, or even 30% of the time. But they're the ones that got to where they are, and if you're working for them, you gotta trust it. And if you can't trust them, then you're not in the right job. So,
thank you again very much, Kerry. We appreciate your time. We are now going to take a break, and if everyone can return to your computer at 10 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. See you later.
Time to speak with us.
Thank you.
Chris. Call everybody down. Okay. Thank you for coming back. Repopulating, as Liz says. Wonderful. About half of us have to come back yet. This is a tremendous turnout, my goodness. I'll try to live up to it. They just see what's on here. Someone's chatting. Okay, you are ready. Okay, obviously we've had some sound challenges, and appreciate you hanging in there. The first thing I want to say is one of the things I'm going to do this time with you is that we're going to do more talk time with each other in your groups than I've ever done before, because we're not going to conclude with the time that we used last time we met, where everyone is asked to share one of their major takeaways. So you're going to be going in and out of groups to discuss certain things that I will ask you to talk about. So that's going to take place. And one of the reasons that I like to do that is that as a leader, you're moving from one situation to another situation to another situation, whether we're just talking about your personal life, but your professional life and your personal life interconnects throughout the day. And your ability to be the best version of yourself that you can be as you change the context is a very important leadership ability. And we will be talking more about that in terms of centering and recentering as we keep working on things. The other thing that is important, I think, for us to keep in mind now, we've worked together a couple times, so we have some things that we know in common, hopefully. And those things are about you. They're not about me. What I'm here to try to do is give you things that are difference makers in terms of your abilities and capabilities, but it's up to you to embrace them, make them your own, and apply them in different situations. So one of the things we're going to do a little bit of work on things that we've already worked on to some extent. And my hope is that as you look at a new part of the PowerPoint, you will be able to focus on what's on that screen and think about yourself and think about what you know and what you have to offer others as a leader because of what's on the screen. So it's about you. It's only about me, and that I'm sharing things with you that I have learned about leadership over the 50 graduate level leadership classes that I've taught, and being in several high performance expectation leadership roles since I was a 26-year-old vice principal of a high school. Now, let's go to the first screen. So I'm here it comes. Take a look at it. Liz is saying just a minute. And there we go. My first choice is this. So take a look at it, look at the context. What's it about? And this is a rhetorical question. What is this going to be about? What's your take on the context? One of the things that I said to you right away is that the better you get at becoming the person you're capable of being, the better leader you're going to be. So read that first quote. And now zero in on the visual. What's the visual about? What can I take from the visual? And what is that first quote? Imagination is more important than knowledge. That's a quote from Einstein. You had it in your materials. And I want to say, one of the things that's really important is Jen does a really good job of getting you something that you can look at on your smartphone, but it doesn't include everything that's on the 2 pages. So if you would make sure that you take a look at the context that's on those 2 pages you get, that'll be helpful. So let's give it a try. Why is imagination more important than knowledge? And who's up for it? Anybody give us a shot at that? I'm looking at y'all. Why in the world would imagination be more important than knowledge? Christine, hope you're feeling okay. Can't hear you. Whoa. Right, well, we don't have her. She's looking spectacular, but we can't hear her. Okay.
Can you
This is where interpretive dance would come in helpful, Christine.
Okay, can you make a case for why imagination could be seen as more important than knowledge in terms of leadership?
hear me now?
Oh, God, very, very nice.
You can hear me?
Yes,
Oh, okay. I believe that imagination is open-ended, and so it leaves you open to being curious and reaching out for answers, as opposed to straight knowledge, which if you think you know everything, you're not going to learn anything more.
yeah,
That's
excellent. Other take on it. Other take on it. Why is we're talking leadership here, right? Leadership is about relationships. Why would imagination be more important than knowledge? What did Einstein say? Knowledge is limited, but imagination encircles the world. So think relationships. Think relationships. Why would imagination be more important than what you know in relation to leadership is about relationships? Christina.
I think it just pushes you as a leader, and you're thinking big and sharing your ideas with those around you, to be open to their ideas and think outside the box and bigger than you would probably do on your own.
Excellent. Good point. Julie.
I think as a leader, often what we're doing is thinking about the potential and pushing those who work with us and who we are in charge of leading to reach their own potential. And I think it requires imagination and flexibility of thought to see what that potential might be beyond the current reality.
Excellent. Good point. Another point. Lloyd.
Well, if you think about who made that quote about it being more important, Einstein was known for thinking outside the box. And if you just rely on knowledge, you can be limited in what you can accomplish. But if you have imagination, you can imagine a different situation that maybe is a little outside the box.
Mm-hmm. Jamie, thanks.
Yeah, hi. Basically, in order to see other perspectives, you need imagination.
Excellent idea. They're all good. They're all good. Let me say it this way to you. How good a leader are you going to be if you don't know your people? And knowing your people requires you to be able to imagine more than you get just in your interactions. What does it take to walk a mile in their shoes? That old saying just really works here. Because for you're going to relate to your people, you got to know them, and you got to make some assumptions about them to be able to know what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what matters most to them, because you've got to be able to connect with them. And so everything you said makes sense. And your ability not to consider things and consider things. Imagination isn't about fancy, it's about purposeful imagining what the other person's world is like. Because if you're trying to connect with your world to their world in terms of vision and moving forward together, it's really important to know your people and to know the culture that you're working with, that people are a part of. Okay, so that's a good starting place for us, an excellent point. In that slide, we also have, if we could go back to that, Liz, the bottom of that slide. We are all a work in progress. Now, I can say that and use it all inclusively because one way or another, we are all a work in progress. Whether it's by accident, you pick up things through your life, or it's by intention. Right now, we're working by intention, not just by accident. And there will be some happy accidents along the way. But to know things that you really want to get better at and be intentional to practice those things, it takes practice and intention and putting yourself out and making it a priority for you to learn things, not just by naming them, but by learning the know-how to put them in action, which is something that you received in your materials. So let me give you this question. Let me give you this question. We'll make it. We're not going to group you yet. Okay. Let's make it this way. Okay. In junior high school, this is a me story. I had previously been a Little League All-Star as a 11-year-old and a 12-year-old, and I really thought I would make the 8th grade team as a 7th grader in basketball. Now in basketball, there aren't that many people. I made the football team because, you know, everybody makes the team. I thought I was going to be able to do just like I did as a year younger and make the basketball team, and I got cut. It was devastating to me. I did not imagine that could happen because I had not yet realized I only had average athletic ability. I was not going to play shortstop for the Yankees. Now, my dad, very, very smart guy, had a conversation with me, and I'll cut it short. He asked me, what are you going to work on? Because this is something you did not want to happen. And he said, there are only 2 things that nobody has to be better than you are, that you can focus on, that you have a chance to be just as good as anybody at. And I want you to think about it, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. What do you think those 2 things were that he said? Now, there are lots of choices, but what's the qualifier in that one? He said to me, there'll always be people bigger, stronger, faster, more experienced, smarter than you are. But there are 2 things that if you work on them, they matter, and you don't have to be worse than anybody about. All right, what do you think? What do you think they might have been? So here's where we take risks and we throw out 2 things, because there's lots of good choices, because said, but the limiter on this one is you could be as good as anybody about these 2 things. Anybody? Jamie, you're up.
Belief and dedication.
Belief and dedication. Okay. Another person. Good answers. Belief and dedication. Belief in yourself and dedication. One of them is very, very close to what he said. Sarah. Where? Sarah. Hey, Sarah, please.
Attitude and effort.
Attitude and effort.
That was
supposed to get it that quick.
I didn't, who said that? Somebody else said that.
I don't know.
I was going to say attitude, but.
He said attitude and effort. Now, maybe he got it at a Dale Carnegie course. I don't know. He was a Rotary president. So he was taking courses too. But anyway, here's the point. Here's the point, of course. There are things that you can do no matter how good you are And I think he was right about those things. You could be right about other things, but knowing who you are and what you have to offer is pretty darn important for you as a leader. So now we're going to flip to the next slide, and I'm going to ask you about things I've already worked with you on. So, here we go. First of all, when you look at the slide, where do you start? What are you drawn to?
You don't have a screen, so they would just need to respond.
Okay.
Picture.
Now,
The picture.
okay, what is it a picture of?
Well, let's see. It's Hoptewa, Sun, Life, and Hope sculpture.
Okay, it's a casino. I have a collection of them. That's a carving, a root carving by somebody who is part of the Hopi Indian clan. And it's an image of life and light. And so when you're a leader, one of the things that we expect you to do is have an ability to light the way for people and to be able to share the light with people. Because everybody has contributions to make that can increase the light metaphorically. And so your brain, I picked two things to say about your brain. Look at them. Our brains are miracles of recognizing and associating patterns and similarities. I wish I would have put the word patterns in there, but I missed it. But can only access what you have available to you in your knowledge and your experience. Your brain doesn't know what it doesn't know, but your brain is more attuned to what it knows than other things that it doesn't know. So where does that start us? Everybody has a brain, everybody knows things, everybody has experiences that they've had that they can draw on, but that's it. Unless you do what's under that. Unless you do what? And under that, I mean by the second list of 1, 2. Okay. But I'm begging the obvious. Your brain is only capable of thinking in a certain way based on what you already have in your head. Another way to say it. If you want to think metacognitively, imaginatively, who has to do that? You have to decide to overcome the primary consciousness brain that we all have that wants to react by habit and wants to react based on your limited knowledge and experience. Because we all have limited knowledge and experience based on what we've done in our lifetime, what we value, what we care about, what we believe. And so metacognition is your mindful ability to think about, assess, and guide your own thinking. If you can't do it as a leader, you're going to be a limited leader. If you can't imagine somebody else's reality that you're trying to work with and get them to continue to grow, you're going to be a very limited leader. Because you want people to be able to become what they're capable of becoming as a leader. And one of the things that we have started to work on is that pausing to think is an important way, is an important habit that you can practice, because if you pause to think and not just respond to a habitual response or just respond to how you automatically respond, and think about the possibilities, imagine the possibilities. And that's where paradox is going to come in. You could be wrong. You could be so certain and be wrong. But if you don't think about it, if you don't own your behavior because you have the ability to think and think about other people's points of view and other people's truths that are very much alive for them, you're going to be a very limited leader. So at this particular point in time, I want us to group, and we're going to be grouping more than once here. And so I'm going to flip to the next screen and describe what your first attempt at grouping is going to be about. Okay. I like this metaphor. Wherever you go, you bring yourself with you, and you bring your shadow with you. So I'm going to speak of a shadow with you metaphorically. We all cast a shadow as a person and as a leader. And my version of what I mean by a shadow metaphorically, you're going to have everybody who knows you, whether they know you very well because they work directly with you, they still don't really know everything about you, or people's impression of you who don't really work with you at all. That shadow sense of who you are is important as a leader. Because what people come to you when they're going to interact with you is going to be a colored lens based on what they think of you. And so over time, people who work with you are going to develop a way of looking at you, and they will have a sense of what you have impacted them with that they're factoring in. And so that shadow effect is what the question down below is about. So paradoxically, your leadership is not about you at the same time that it's absolutely about you. It's not about you because it's what you do for others that's going to make the biggest difference in terms of what you're able to accomplish as a leader. And it's not about you because you have to become the person that makes others more successful, to help others be and become who they are capable of being. Now, here's your question then. I want you to think of, when you go into your group, I want you to think of what you would like people to say about you if you just had an ability to have them truthfully communicate what they think about you and your leadership. And what do you think people would say about themselves because of your leadership? What would you want them to say? I'm not asking you to tell me what you think they would say. I'm asking you to think, what do you want people to say about you as a leader? What do you want people who work with you to think about themselves because of you? Okay, so those are the two things I want you to talk about. And what we're going to do is go into groups, and we have the groups established. And so, Liz, are we good here?
Yes, oh my God.
And we're going 10 minutes, this first time. We'll check in with you to see how things are going in 10 minutes. This is times where you share with your fellow travelers. We okay? We okay? Okay, hey, go for it. Nicolette, Kirsten was going to be a facilitator, but she's not.
Ryan is not there, so I'm gonna move. Kristen, yeah.
Does she know? We have a Ryan Rudge, I'll fire as a blank chair. And does that have us over the blank?
Hello, Liz.
Kristen, go ahead and facilitate this group. Ryan Rudge was not able to make it in here.
Oh, yeah, happy to
Thank you.
help. Yay. And so by facilitating, it's just making sure that we all get a chance to share. So does somebody want to volunteer to start, or do you want me to randomly?
So are we answering how we want to be seen by other people?
How we think our leadership is seen by other people, and then oh. Liz is in and out.
We're about halfway through. No, a little less than halfway through, so we still got a lot to go.
Okay, perfect.
I'm glad to see you.
Glad to see you guys. Yeah, yeah. We have training in a little bit, so I might have to cut out here shortly again too. So I apologize about that.
Yeah, well, Liz won't put you in a leadership role then
Okay.
as we move forward. And,
okay.
We appreciate you being out there doing the Lord's work.
Thank you.
Welcome back. How'd that go?
It was good.
Awesome.
Up, down, sideways.
Okay, everyone has returned.
Okay, super.
Go ahead.
Okay, just one quick little story. Being superintendent of schools, people have a take on you. Sometimes it's positive. Sometimes they think you are the great Satan. You're definitely out there. But one of the things that I believe so strongly is that you never, ever give up your own people. Now, so when I was listening to Terry, that whole idea of being there for others and protecting your people who are doing the damnedest to be as good as they can be in their job, you take the hits as superintendent, in my opinion. But one of the worst nights of my life wasn't a mistake that I made, except I didn't review what the person on my staff did, who I have tremendous respect for. We all make mistakes. But I wanted to be the person that took the hits. And I always thought that if I'm going to have influence in my role, I've got to take the hits, because I am responsible for everything. And I want to be responsible for everything because I want the authority to be that person. Now, how you decide how you handle responsibility and take the hits for things that you were in charge of, that's one thing. It's another thing to protect your people. and they are going to be your people the next day. One little story that I don't know that it fits here overly well, but I think it is that we had a situation where we had a meeting at one of our middle schools. I think we called them junior high schools at that time, where we had our high school staff and our middle school staff together. And it was towards the beginning of the year where a new teacher that we hired was in a new situation and was wanting to assert herself, as I see it now, and to become a player, you know, in the district. And she came up to me and was extremely complimentary about the district and was glad to be there, and heard about me and thought that I was good enough to have her favor. And then she didn't know about relationships in the district, and that's why I'm telling you this story, because the person I'm married to and was married to at that time was the chairman of the English department at Lake Oswego High School almost forever and taught for 46 years. She happened to be in the restroom when she came back into the restroom and told some of her new friends that she had just put me in my place, and I was telling me about what I needed to do my job well. Now, I didn't know anything about the person, but obviously after that, when my wife, after the day was over and I'd spoken, and you know, I was checking with her to what I say makes sense, you know, how did I do? And she said, well, who's the woman that just wrote you off and just challenged you in your leadership? And I'm thinking, what? So what I'm saying here is, because you know they were in the restroom together, so she was hearing all that. So we don't really know what everybody's gig is, but we have to try to know it as best we can. And part of that is about imagining what's possible there. And so it's the what's possible time. If I just went from that one interaction with her and I assumed that she was not really an adoring thing, but she was going to be a very positive player and all that. And so what I'm saying is, because it's going to lead into what we're doing next about paradox, you don't really know all the time what somebody has going on in their motivation and the kind of person they are, and want to be and want to project to be. But your ability to pick up on that from people, you know, and be open-minded about it. No matter, you know, as superintendent of schools, most people who say something to you are going to want to say something that is what how hard do you think it is to get actual honesty from people about what they have going on and not going on in their world? And most of the time people want to tell you what you want, they think you want to hear. And you got to cultivate a culture where you don't ask that, where you want to hear what people have to say. And so in that moment, it wasn't about that as much. But you want to have people that aren't yes people around you. You want to have people who will tell you what's bothering them. And so about what we're doing, or, you know, that are going to be honest with you, and you have to create the safety for that. When you're in a role where you can make a significant difference in someone else's life and career, you have to create the safety for people to say what they really feel. Now, that's a kind of a sideways way to kind of get at that. But now let's look at paradox. Let's look at paradox. And Liz, can you flip that page to the next slide? Okay, now you've read the materials. Take a look at the visual and the definition. Anytime we're dealing with a concept, it's important, or an ability to know what are the essential things to know about it. If I say paradox, most people misuse it, that I have, you know, or not most people, many people misuse the term paradox. But paradox is a statement that initially seems counterintuitive or opposed to common sense. Initially, it's not going to fit your little world. And so you got to look at it a different way to see if there isn't another truth that you want to take into consideration. As a leader, open-mindedness to rethinking one's point of view is a habit worth cultivating. What's the habit there? Well, pausing is a habit. Can you develop the habit of pausing to outsmart your brain? Because your brain is going to do the automatic right away. And it only has what it has available to it in terms of memory. So one of my best examples is I have 3 vehicles, and including my truck. I love my truck because I'm a dirt person, and so I've got different music CDs in all 3 of the vehicles. And so this time of the year, I don't drive the sports car very much at all. And I shifted the play or lineup into the truck. So I am driving the truck now, and I'm old school. So Bruce Springsteen comes up, and a friend of mine gave me their list of favorite Springsteen songs, and I noticed this before, but it really hit me this time. One of my favorite Springsteen songs is Pink Cadillac. I don't know, anybody a fan? Anybody out there a fan? Okay, I got 2 fans. Anyway, the song right before that song is one I've not had as one of my favorites. Something like You're the One or something like that. But this was a CD that was put together by a friend and given to me. So there's a gap between the songs, which happens with that situation. And so it was really interesting to me. I didn't know where Pink Cadillac was on that list. And when the one song before it stopped, even before the music started and the drums started for Pink Cadillac, my mind started the drum beat before the actual track started. Why did that happen? We've already talked about it, and it matters. Your brain picks up on patterns. Your brain picks up on similarities. My brain remembered that song that preceded it and started to introduce the music that was going to happen when the next song, which was Pink Cadillac, started. What does that tell you about your brain? It starts thinking about how you're going to respond to something before you're even aware of it. I told you that before. And one of the things the brain does is it helps you by anticipating, and it helps you with habits. Habit is a really important ability if it heads you in the right direction. But if your habit heads you in the wrong direction, it's really important to have the ability to think about it differently than you usually would think about it. So, thinking paradoxically calls for differentiating between the following mindsets. I want you to develop one of those mindsets. Which one? I'm just asking that rhetorically. If you see a mindset that is contradictory as a point of view, interpreted by you as not valid, what do you do about thinking? You stop thinking. Typically, you stop thinking. Rather than asking yourself, is there a different way I can look at this statement, even though I think it's not valid, so I could possibly imagine a merit in the other way of looking at it? Is there another way to look at it that has merit? Or is everybody that you're going to be working with as a leader going to think exactly like the way you do? Good luck if you think that. And so your ability to think about what other people have to offer that isn't exactly what you think you want to hear is a really important ability. So there is such a thing as a competing point of view, where you don't think of it that way, but if you allow yourself to reset your perspective and look at it from a different point of view. How many of you experienced marriages? Okay. Ever find a competing point of view or a contradictory point of view in those worlds? Okay. I think I made my point. Let's look at a paradox then. No, so this is what I'm going to ask you to think about, because you're going to go into a segment now where you're going to be assigned paradoxes to see if you can enter it from a different point of view and make sense of it and come up with the truth in it. So here's one sample paradox. The way to personal growth is a destructive path. What do people usually say about personal growth? It's all what? Good, positive, attaboy, attagirl, you've been growing. How in the world is it a destructive path? All right, if you give me the screen again, I'm going to ask you to weigh in. Anybody's willing to weigh in. How is personal growth a destructive path? Very important point. What is it? How can you look at it? Okay, who we got? Lakeisha.
Well, you have to break down some of your thoughts about things. You have to weed out some of the negative behaviors, or I'd be able to identify them, weed them out, which is really destructing or deconstructing your thoughts and behaviors. Get them out the way and make room for those positive mindsets that will help you to grow.
Okay, great start. Have you ever experienced something that you had to change the way you thought about it to embrace it? Can anybody come up with an example? Amy?
Oh, well, I was going to say something a little different than Lakeisha.
Okay, say whatever you were gonna say.
Well, I was going to say that sometimes if you focus too much on personal growth, you may forget or be destroying relationships that are outside yourself in that process. So that was sort of
Excellent.
where I took it.
Excellent. A paradox doesn't just have one answer. And that's a great example. We can look at it multiple ways because we're looking at it to find merit and value. Is there merit and value in another point of view, someone else's point of view? And if you find that point of view and it does have merit, your ability to intermix or to integrate points of view, you're going to be stronger from having someone else's opinion that actually matters than you're going to be just thinking you're king of the universe and you know all. Yeah, Jamie. Jamie.
I was just going to say we learn most from our mistakes, I feel like, so we need that adversity to grow.
Good point. Another comment. Anybody else?
Stick my hand up.
Christina.
I was just thinking back to something Kerry had said, which is that leadership is about holding on to those beliefs, I guess, those kind of unbending beliefs, but also being flexible. So I think it's that paradox of remembering your core values, but letting other people's in too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think when you talk about core values, you know, there's a really important distinction. If you have things that you are not willing to compromise on, I'm not saying every different opinion has merit and value that you should embrace. I can see all kinds of things out there in the world that I don't embrace at all, and I draw the line on. But do you know what you draw the line on? Do you know what your line of no compromise really is? Now,
Well, you were talking about personal growth and yeah. And one of that to me would be the destruction of current assumptions. And the best example I can think of that is becoming a parent. I became a parent relatively later in life. And I had all these ideas about how this was going to go. And it's all turned out. But yeah, the world just turned upside down and everything was different. So had to embrace that.
Yep. Okay, let's set it up now for us to be able to do some paradoxes. And so Liz, if you could flip the screen to the next slide. Great job. Loved what you had to offer. Okay. The next slide is this one. Scope it out. What's going on here? Okay, that's fine. So because I have the paradoxes I'm going to have you work on, what I'm going to do is just read down through the list, and your group is going to be assigned one of these. So, and then I'm going to flip back to the mindset relative to a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. So here's some paradoxes that you're going to talk about in your group and see if you can figure out ways that these are true. Being good enough is the secret to becoming exceptional. Some things are never so present as when they are absent. the best way to expand consciousness is by shrinking it. In your search for truth, you can't outpace yourself. The path to self-realization is not a line, but a circle. Sometimes it's better to be understood than to be specific. Okay, that's what's heading your way in a moment. But let's look at the visual. It takes a growth mindset to be truly a work in progress leader. A work in progress leader. What's the difference between a fixed leader, a fixed mindset leader, and a growth mindset leader? And Liz, take me back to the full screen. If you can. Yeah. All right, now it's up to you again. What's the difference? What is the difference between somebody who's really a fixed mindset leader and a growth mindset leader, using the images that we've talked about and what we are trying to do with this particular experience of working together? I want to start with fixed mindset. What's characteristic of a fixed mindset? Anybody that is willing to share?
A lack of flexibility.
That was Heather. Okay.
Well, I talked over somebody else. That wasn't me, but
And me, yeah, the two of us talked together. Hi, Heather. Hi, Julie.
Okay, Julie, do you want to start and then I'll go to Heather?
Sure, I said a lack of flexibility.
Mm-hmm. One right way, my way. Okay, what?
yeah, and then just kind of that's the way it is, right? Like not being open to anything different. So
yeah. And Curtis.
Someone who's been doing it a certain way for so long that that's the only way to do it.
That's a great example. This is the way we do it here. And Brian.
An autocratic, we're going to do it my way. And I don't really care what anybody else's thoughts, opinions, ideas might be.
And Brian, I'm really glad to see you here. But yeah, I don't really care what you think. This is what works. This is the way we do it. And that inability to be flexible and even consider the merits of another point of view. That ability to do that, to have the dexterity of mind. When we talk about paradox, we're talking about dexterity of mind. I can look at it this way and it's true. But if I can look at it this way and I see truth in that also, it gives me the ability to work within 2 or 3 different points of view that are all valid. And you're going to make better decisions if you consider all those things as a leader, and honoring your people and appreciating their different point of view comes with that. And, you know, as Brian just said, if it's my way or the highway, and I don't care about your point of view, what does it tell them about how they feel about themselves? That's Sarah going. Okay, Sarah.
I was just thinking that it takes, from a leadership perspective, it takes courage to have a growth mindset, that you have to be willing to, I was saying this in my group, be reflective and not just say, well, that's the way I've always done it. And I think of like an athlete, whether you like LeBron James or not. One time I saw this thing, it was a lot of years ago, that he picks a skill to work on every summer in the off time. And I'm like, boy, LeBron James picks a skill to work on. So I mean, I think never, kind of being reflective and having the courage to try something new is what I was thinking.
Good.
If you have a flexibility to consider other people's opinions, it will, help them have more value for their own opinions. If it's my way or the highway, it devalues them and makes them feel less.
Excellent, excellent. I'm going to move along now, and you did a great job. Christopher, okay. Okay, now here we go, because you're going to go into a group, and here's your group. So number 1 is going to be the Jen Peterson group. Number 2 on the list is going to be is Ryan still here, or no? It's Kristen. Is Kirsten, excuse me. Number 3 is going to be Lakeisha. Number 4 is Paul Room group. Number 5 is Jen Singer. And number 6 is Christopher Boyer. How many minutes? Let's go. If you finish yours, because I'm going to come back to you and have you share what you came up with as a group. And the facilitator has to pick the person that's going to share. Make sure that you get an agreement about who's going to share from your group. And let's go 10 minutes on this and think about it and see if you can find ways that what the statement is there is true. 2 truths, 3 truths. All right. Okay, now I have to find just all people. No, they all come at once. Okay. Yeah, they're all populating. Okay, populating. Yeah. They are populating. Yeah. I see population. Okay, so there's your screen. And you can ask each one to bring their who's the representative for each group. Okay, I'd take that off the screen now. Okay. Just give me full people. Okay. Whoa, wonder of wonders. Okay. Who's speaker for group 1? Paradox 1.
I'll be speaker for group 1. So paradox number 1 is the paradox of being good enough is the secret to becoming exceptional. And if we could sum it up in one comment, I think it's the comment that perfection can be the enemy of progress, particularly when we're leading people. I think it's important to celebrate their success and to support them and encourage them, even if it's maybe not perfect. It helps build and helps build their skills and eventually lead them to a higher level. So I think that's a summary of what we were thinking about there.
Good job. Good job. Good job. I once said to a group I was speaking to in Seattle that if you want to become an exceptional leader, you have to master the art of being mediocre. And it kind of took the air out of my speech. Another way to look at it is there are multiple ways to look at these things. There's always too much to do. Your ability to know what you really need to spend the time on to be exceptional and be just good enough to get by with other things is an important leadership ability. Both of those statements, Lloyd's and mine, are true. So it's not just one truth in the other end of a paradox. And so thank you very much. Good job, 2. Who's up on 2?
It's me, me. I apologize, my camera's not working, so everyone's gonna have to look at the beautiful icon on the screen. But can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, so we had some things are never so present as when they are absent. And similar to what Bill just said in terms of many layers and many different things that this can mean, we came up with, I think, 5 or 6. So one was the elephant in the room. So the important thing that no one wants to talk about, but we know is there. And since no one's talking about it, it's more and more obvious. The second was an absence makes the heart grow fonder kind of interpretation. So the idea that when something is not there, someone is missing, you feel their value more. The third was big shoes to fill. So the idea that when leadership does transition or someone takes a job that someone was previously doing, that they may do it differently and people may miss the old ways, but that doesn't mean that the new ways are worse. And next one was silence speaks volumes. So the idea that you don't have to verbalize everything and that by not saying something, you might be saying more. Kirsten made a point of, for example, if a leader calls a meeting and nobody shows up or somebody asks for input and nobody responds, that speaks more than what they could have actually said. And then the last interpretation was about criticism versus support. So if the absence of criticism can show the presence of support, you don't have to say, I'm here to support you. But just by not criticizing failure or pointing out things that people can constantly be working on, you're showing a lot of support to their growth.
Super. Great job. Let's move to the next one.
Hi, I'm speaking for
Number
group.
3. Go ahead.
I'm speaking for group 3, which says the best way to expand consciousness is by shrinking it. And we talked a lot about how when you're tackling a really big idea or a really big problem, in order to be successful, focusing specifically on that problem and not letting other issues come into play until you really understand the problem will help you be efficient. And it also will really help if it's a situation where you have a lot of stakeholders. If you shrink it down and let each individual understand their role in something, then they understand how they fit in and how their role is still really important to something that's much bigger.
Excellent. You guys are just being terrific. Let's keep going. 4.
Yeah, for group 4, we had in search for truth. In your search for truth, you can't outpace yourself. And from that, we took the following 3 things. The first thing that came up was overlooking fine details. So you outpace yourself and you may be overlooking some of those fine details in searching for the truth. When you outpace yourself, you're going faster than essentially your brain might be capable of going. So the second thing that we said was you may be devaluing yourself, not believing in yourself because you're outpacing yourself. And the third thing that we said is there's a possibility of misinterpreting information due to outpacing yourself. So knowing what your pace should be, I think, is crucial in finding the truth. Obviously, you could apply that to several different examples and environments. So I thought it was an interesting paradox.
Super. Later on, we're going to be talking about outpacing your readiness. Excellent. You guys are just terrific. All right, where are we? 5. Lucky number 5. Who's up?
Jen nominated me, nominated me to speak, so I'm going to. We had the path to self-realization is not a line, but a circle. And we came up with several kind of interpretations and support for this, that it's a constant process of change and taking on what life brings you. And so it's always kind of bringing you back to the same central person that you are and all of that. And that in that same vein, it's a circle of change. You adapt something new and then you come back and it's a reiterative process. So that was kind of our overall, all three or four of our takeaways and statements were related to that.
Super, very good. Think about it also in terms of your self-reflection. If you don't circle back to that which is most alive within you and hold yourself accountable, you're going to have difficulty moving forward. Excellent. Boy, you guys are really good. How about sometimes it's better to be understood than to be specific? Our last one. Who's up? Group 6. Here, do we have a group 6?
That's
Brian Bills. But it's on mute.
Brian, are you up? We can't hear you.
Uh-oh, Brian, is this your tactic to not speak for our group?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Darn. Okay. Our group sort of looked at this in a couple of ways. I think the first was the recognition that if you are overly specific, you stunt creativity, imagination, perspective, because you're not inviting thought, you're inviting compliance. I think one of the other ideas that came to us was it's from a relationship perspective, being overly specific can also be seen as demeaning or assuming that no one else has value to add or can understand the goals or the objectives. So but then last point I think was this is also situationally specific, right? Depending on sort of where you might be in the process. If you are outlining objectives or giving direction for something to get done, maybe being more specific gives more clarity and allows resources to be used efficiently to meet the goal. So I think those are our 3 takeaways.
Excellent. God, you guys did great. My favorite one on that particular issue is Donald Trump. Make America great again. No specifics. Everybody gets to create their own specifics. I can't tell what your response is. Not a Trumper. I'm just saying he's good
As a tactic, I think it's brilliant.
As a tactic, it's brilliant. Okay, let's leave that. All right, I want you to see 2 screens and then it's going to go to Christopher. I just want you to see that's something that you're going to get. We're not going to cover it. So Liz, if you show on the next screen. The what, why, how model and that notion of mental models help you to ask the right questions. So look at this when you get the material and your new partner pairings. And then one more visual that I had prepared for us to talk about, and we may pull it out at a different time, but go back to the comment about practicing every day. And so thank you. I think you were absolutely fantastic, and Christopher is going to take it from here.
Thank you so very much, Bill, and thank you all for being here today. I do want to say a quick show of hands. How many people got something valuable out of today? Fantastic. We know that where you place your attention is where you start to drive results. It's how you sensitize your mind, and it's how those things become more real and present in your life. And so we hope that this process is helping to bring your attention to some different aspects of leadership that you may not have been may not have been top of mind. And in that circular model of learning, it's maybe some of these things you've heard before, and that's completely fine. It's quite normal that we just need to keep circling back to some of these things. So I hope that this has been great for all of you. And one more time, in addition to communicating with your partners in this upcoming month, I do want to encourage you all to reach out to myself or Bill or Liz for questions and anything else, feedback regarding the program. Again, I'd love to have coffee with you if we haven't had coffee already. So does everybody have their roster, which has everyone's email, contact information and everything in it, right? Everybody should have a email that contains your class roster. So please do reach out. We appreciate you all, and we hope that you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. We'll be getting together during the month of December. And I know that this is a very important time of year for me that is naturally reflective. And so I very much thank all of you for being a part of this program, because as much as we would like to think we're teachers, we're not teachers if we don't have students. So thank you all for being here and being a part of what we're doing, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving. We'll catch you later. I'll ask the leadership team to stay on.